Did you know that the UK, one of the world's leading economies, has a staggering 25% of its population living below the poverty line? A shocking statistic, isn't it? The United Kingdom, a country synonymous with economic prosperity, a powerhouse of global finance and trade, home to the City of London, one of the world's most influential financial hubs, and a major player on the global stage. The UK's economy is the fifth largest in the world by nominal GDP, boasting a highly developed and market-oriented economy. But as we pull back the curtain on the UK's glittering economic performance, a starkly different picture begins to emerge. A picture that is far removed from the gleaming skyscrapers of London and the bustling trading floors of the city. A picture that is marked by the harsh reality of poverty and income inequality. In the midst of this economic powerhouse, a staggering 1 in 4 people are living below the poverty line. That's around 16 million people, a number greater than the entire population of London. The gap between the rich and the poor is widening, with the top 20% of earners in the UK earning nearly 6 times more than the bottom 20%. Income inequality is not just a number, it's a reality that millions face every day. It's the struggle to put food on the table, the challenge of keeping a roof overhead, the stress of juggling bills. It's a reality that starkly contrasts with the image of prosperity and wealth that the UK projects on the global stage. As we delve deeper into the shadows of this seemingly prosperous nation, we start to see the cracks in the facade. This is the stark reality of the UK's economy, a reality that is often overshadowed by the bright lights of economic success, but a reality that cannot be ignored. As we dive deeper into the shadows of this seemingly prosperous nation, we start to see the cracks in the facade. The top 10% of the UK's population own more than 50% of the country's wealth. A concerning disparity, wouldn't you agree? This striking statement gives us a glimpse into the stark wealth gap that exists in the UK. But let's delve a bit deeper to understand the vast difference between the richest and the poorest. The wealthiest 1% of households in the UK own almost a quarter of all wealth. On the other hand, the poorest 50% of households own just 9%. This gap is not just a number, it's a reflection of the lives and opportunities of millions of people. This wealth gap is a culmination of various systemic factors. One significant contributor is wage stagnation. Over the past decade, average wages have barely kept up with inflation. This means that while the cost of living has increased, wages have not risen correspondingly, leaving many unable to build wealth. Another factor is the rising living costs. The price of essential goods and services such as food, housing and healthcare has been rising steadily. This trend hits those on lower incomes hardest, as a higher proportion of their income is spent on these essentials. The wealthy, on the other hand, can invest their surplus income, further increasing their wealth. We must also consider the role of inherited wealth. With property prices skyrocketing in the past decades, those who inherit property have a substantial financial advantage. This perpetuates a cycle where wealth remains concentrated within the same families. The wealth gap is not just about money. It's about access to opportunities, quality of life, and social mobility. It's about the kind of society we live in and the values we uphold. A society's health can be judged by the gap between its richest and poorest. So what does this tell us about the UK? In 2022, nearly 4.3 million children were living in poverty in the UK. How can we justify this in one of the wealthiest nations on earth? Picture this. Millions of young lives trapped in the quicksand of poverty, their potential stunted by circumstances they didn't choose. This is not the plot of a dystopian novel, but the harsh reality for many children in the United Kingdom. The dark side of the UK's economy reveals an unsettling narrative that's all too real for these vulnerable youngsters. Child poverty in the UK isn't merely a term, but a lived reality for 1 in 3 children. That's a third of the nation's future, grappling with the fallout of economic disparity. It's not just about the lack of money, but the cascade of consequences that follow. Poor nutrition, limited access to quality education, and an environment that's often hostile to the blossoming of young minds. Now let's talk about homelessness. It's not just the visible rough sleepers we see on the streets, it's families crammed into temporary accommodations, children without a place to call home. Over 120,000 children were living in temporary housing in 2022. Imagine a childhood defined by uncertainty and transience, the psychological toll it takes on these young souls. And then, there's food insecurity. The specter of hunger isn't confined to developing nations. It haunts the corridors of the UK too. In 2022, over 2 million children were at risk of going to bed hungry. That's 2 million children too many. In a land of plenty, no child should have to wonder where their next meal is coming from. The impact of economic disparity is far-reaching and profound. It doesn't just affect the present, but also casts a long shadow over the future. For these children, the economic divide isn't an abstract concept but a stark reality that shapes their world and their dreams. The cost of economic disparity is often paid by those least able to afford it. Government policies have a significant role in shaping a nation's economic landscape, but are they always beneficial for all its citizens? Within the heart of the United Kingdom, government policies are a double-edged sword. On one side, they are designed to stimulate economic growth and prosperity. The government allocates resources, sets regulations, and devises strategies to maintain stability and encourage investments. Policies such as low interest rates and tax incentives are often used to foster business development and employment. But let's turn the sword over to see the other side. Some policies, while advantageous to certain sectors, may inadvertently widen the wealth gap and exacerbate poverty. One such controversial policy is the austerity measures implemented in the aftermath of the global financial crisis. The intention was to reduce the nation's debt by cutting public spending, but the impact was felt most acutely by the vulnerable and less affluent. The austerity measures led to reduced funding for public services and welfare benefits, placing an immense burden on those who rely on them. The wealth gap widened and the poverty rate escalated. Critics argue that these measures disproportionately affected the poor, while the wealthy remained relatively unscathed. Moreover, the government's role in housing policies has also been under scrutiny. The lack of affordable housing has pushed many into a cycle of poverty and homelessness. The government's failure to adequately address this issue has been a contributing factor to the economic inequality we see today. So, we see that while the government's role in shaping the economy is undeniably significant, it's not always beneficial for all. The policies can often mirror a balancing act, a tightrope walk where the safety net seems to be missing for some. This brings us to a crucial question: is the government striking the right balance? Are the policies truly serving the needs of all citizens, or are they further driving a wedge between the haves and the have-nots? The decisions made in the halls of power echo in the homes of the powerless. But who is listening? The future is not set in stone. It is shaped by the choices we make today. So what choices will the UK make for its economic future? It's a question that deserves thoughtful consideration, especially in light of the challenges we've explored. As we stand at the crossroads, there are several paths that the UK could potentially take. One possible route is policy changes. By implementing more equitable taxation systems, the government could work towards reducing the wealth gap. This could involve taxing the wealthy at a higher rate or cracking down on offshore tax havens. Another avenue to explore is social initiatives. Grassroots movements and non-profit organizations can play a critical role in making a difference. They can provide support to the vulnerable, advocate for better wages, or campaign for affordable housing. These initiatives could also focus on education and skill development, helping individuals to improve their economic prospects. Economic reforms, too, should not be overlooked. Encouraging entrepreneurship, investing in infrastructure, or fostering innovation could all contribute to a more robust and resilient economy. But it's not just about what the government or organizations can do. It's also about what each one of us can do. We can make conscious choices, whether it's supporting local businesses, volunteering our time, or using our voices to advocate for change. We can be the catalysts for a brighter economic future. It's important to remember that these are not quick fixes. They require commitment, perseverance, and collective effort. But if we are willing to take these steps, we can start to address the dark side of the UK's economy. The dark side of the UK's economy is a challenge to overcome, not a destiny to accept. So what will your role be in shaping a more equitable future?